Okay.
Cool. So let me do this. Make sure I'm recording to my computer. And okay. Evan Powell, thank you so much for making some time. And I don't know why I didn't pick you earlier to interview, because you've been so like instrumental in my life, and you're
That's nice.
actually my hero, to be honest.
Oh,
You're so, I'm
come
serious.
on.
I'm serious. Uh,
You're the one who went to IIT.
no, but still.
Yeah,
Um,
that's nice of you.
and people will find out why after they hear all your stories and your perspectives. So maybe let's just jump straight into it, and
Super.
let's get into like maybe just the early days. So
Right.
where you grew up and
Yep.
just your upbringing, real quick.
Yeah, just quickly. So again, thanks for having me. It's going to be fun. Some of your other talks have been pretty inspirational. That I've heard interviews you've done. So we've got a lot to live up to here. But long story short, I was raised in a sense by immigrants, but they immigrated to a place called the American South from the North. My parents met at a socially liberal arts college. Moved to Georgia for academic reasons, so they're professors, becoming professors in one case, but also to get involved in civil rights movement in 1962 is when they moved down there. And so, long story short, I was raised by geeks. We were different in that we were Yankees at some level. And by the time I came along, the civil rights movement, and my parents are Caucasian. My mom's kind of mixed Native American. So you can be involved in the civil rights movement, with that background, but it's being supportive, right? It's not as if, they weren't the folks actually generally getting their heads beaten in and things like that.
That's interesting. I can't imagine. My parents were very cookie cutter, very safe. Nothing close to being, what's the word? Against the grain.
Yeah.
And
But
so,
in this grain, if you're from that background, you tend to be, a little bit against it. And so they helped organize the first integrated PTA, things like that, right? So they're being a PTA, a good involved parent, but they were also the ones,
wow. And this
and
too in the
then
state of Georgia,
in the state of
which is
Georgia,
the hotbed.
they were
Wow.
at the second Selma March. They did not cross the bridge the first time with John Lewis, but so they were around in the Southeast marching and stuff like that. But again, you can't play it up too much. I mean, they're Caucasian, right? It's less likely they're going to get killed or any of those things. But that's the overall context. And so actually, if you looked at what the state of Georgia did, which was, I think, pretty smart, but definitely influenced my life, was when they decided, Charlene Hunter called, to integrate the University of Georgia, they basically said, I know what we'll do. We're like increase the size hugely. And we're therefore need to bring in a lot of faculty who are presumably going to be good with all of this. And they added, I think they grew it by about 30–40%. And so my peers in schools, all public schools growing up, were the kids of other professors from that same hiring binge from like 62 to 65, like that, at UGA. And it's part of the mission of these great old land grant colleges, right, is they kind of bring the country together in a funny sort of way through these outposts. So that's what Athens, Georgia is and was, is kind of a quasi-cosmopolitan bubble. I mean, we're talking a small bubble, but a bubble. And so I grew up there, standardized tests were my friend. It was always assumed I'd get out, so to speak. Not like I kind of grew up in a suburb. So then when it came time to go to college, I had some choices, and I just applied to different places that were ranked highly. And I went to one up in the Northeast, Williams College. And there's no way that I would have gotten in without high, SAT scores. Nobody from my high school would have applied to the school in the past. Right? So that's a little bit about my background.
Interesting.
I remember even in going to school, and I wasn't allowed to check out books from this library. This is a minor thing, right? And they're like, what is this kid doing checking these books out? He's, really tiny. And my parents had to say, well, no, he's reading the book. It's like, what are you doing? You know, so there's little things like that. Anyway, I just grew up with a problem with authority, and with the idea that that intelligence sets you free, I suppose. Okay, or maybe not intelligence, but at least the willingness to geek out. I mean, I don't know, there's lots of forms of intelligence. So
Oh, well, it sounds
probably
like the
working in a big institution probably wasn't going to be
yeah.
right for me. Yeah.
Yeah, that's something that I wonder how many people truly are comfortable with, like the realization or that conviction that you had of, you know what, authority structures, conforming to this system is not for me.
Right.
So that's pretty telling of actually what your future career is going to be like. So that's
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you
Looking
see
back on
that
it.
in other people? Like, have you noticed that trend in entrepreneurs or successful entrepreneurs, or has it
Yeah.
been more of a nurture versus nature kind of thing? Or
That's a great question. There is this whole meme going now, right, with the easier money, that you have folks who, you know, now instead of going to investment banking or consulting, although consulting's great, don't get me wrong, that you go and start a company, right? And that does rub me a little bit the wrong way. I think there is a risk that you end up with entrepreneurs who are following a pattern as opposed to breaking norms and creating something new. But on the other hand, you also end up with entrepreneurs who are often really sharp, self-motivated,
yeah,
and they know how
I
to
don't.
play the game. There's a game. How do I play it?
Yeah.
That's not a bad thing to know how to do either. So
I
it's
don't
not
know if you
always
remember. There was
good
this
to be
reality
socially
show.
awkward.
Yeah. Do you remember this reality show? There was two at the time. One was created by Mark Zuckerberg's sister, and then there was another one. I guess it was a rival one, and it was a show maybe like 5-7 years ago. And it was really glorifying and making entrepreneurship a very romantic thing.
Oh yeah.
And there was one episode where I think so the lady, she was working at, I don't know, Pinterest or one of those like startups in San Francisco, and then she quits her job, and then she has a party to to celebrate starting entrepreneurship.
Ah.
uh, and there was like you just made me think of that, because I wonder how many people are like, this should be a funeral, not a party. But anyways,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. And
uh,
then now it's been, well, I started doing kind of crazy stuff right out of college, and but I actually did work for an investment bank. So there you go. But
oh, you did.
it was a very entrepreneurial one, and they immediately had me doing financial analysis and stuff for a project that was built in Syria. In fact, yeah.
Interesting.
So oh yeah,
And
yeah.
was
It
this in
was
New York or in the Bay
no,
Area?
no. I moved with my girlfriend at the time to Portland, Oregon. So I lived in Portland, and it was just finding stuff to do. It was really really interesting. I mean, that Portland was a different town, but
Yeah. Interesting.
but so I had various. But I also at this time was importing stuff from Guatemala because I have a love of that country. I had gone down there during college and studied, and so I had always some entrepreneurial stuff going on the sides, I guess. It's a side hustle. You know, I
Yeah.
don't